evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, the largest single-screen drive-in in the United States. We're certainly glad you could be with us this evening, and don't forget the concession stand is open with all kinds of great things to eat and drink.
89.3 Mahoning Drive-In Radio, your old friend Virgil back once again for another exciting episode of the podcast. As you guys know, the only podcast dedicated to the love and revival of our beloved drive-in culture. Joined as always by my co-host and general manager extraordinaire, Mark. Say hello, my friend.
Hello.
And also joined today by Jeff, King Jeff as I like to call him, owner, projectionist extraordinaire at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. Say hello, Jeff.
Hi, everybody.
If I'm time-stamping this correctly, at the end of 2020, we were saved by the one and only Robert Humanic, who is joining us today on the show, as he came in and joined the projection team officially. And we wanted to kind of catch up with him and see how things are going. So, Robert, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And your timestamp is correct. It was the very end of 2020. I believe it was the show with Bill Moseley, the Texas Chainsaw 2 and 3 show that I assisted Jeff with.
Oh, yeah. Talk about coming in with the bar set high. You're just like,
Yeah.
Okay, let's do this thing. So, yeah, you've been, at this point, you are a seasoned vet here at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, and you've seen it all. You really have. Any experiences that you want to share? Well, why don't we ask, how's things going?
Things are going well. We're about, 6 weeks into the season, and it feels like it's been no time at all, and that it's been years at the same time since we started. It's just such a constant flow of films coming in and going out, and dozens, if not hundreds of other things to consider over the course of the season. And that's just from my one little corner. I might be running the movies, but there's so many other pistons to this engine that are always in operation. And I like to help where I can, but for the most part, it's just what I know in my little part of the machine.
That's what I love about you, Robert. You know, you're always so great about constructive criticism, and you're an opinion that we all take very highly. You are more than beloved, not just with the crew here, but everybody knows you from the documentary. And honestly, the growth here at the Mahoning is a group effort. Everything that we do here is a group effort. And, the reliance on the team to support everything that we do, it's a big ask sometimes. But Robert, you've been so great with all the pivoting that we've been doing, and that's kind of our mode of late is, we consider ourselves still in the infant stages of what we inevitably will plateau and level out to. So we try things out all the time, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, sometimes they're incredibly challenging, but being able to roll with us has been a huge, huge plus. So we appreciate that.
Oh, and as always, thank you for the opportunity, because I enjoyed film projection the little bit that I got to do back when I started in 2012 and 13, and never really thought of it as another opportunity until the former assistant Patrick stepped down. And I still can't quite get over the thrill of it, because it's always exciting. Even when it's exhausting and the hours seem to never end, it's always exciting to be able to bring these movies to people in this environment that is almost gone. I mean, there's still a couple hundred left, but we got to do what we can to keep it from going the way of the dodo.
Absolutely. And it's unique. Obviously we are deep in the culture and connecting with everybody within the culture at this point. But at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, the projectionist is the rock star. And they are the person who is truly running the show, as much as, the MC crown I wear as I walk around. I mean, you guys are truly making the show happen. And yeah, it's a rare form, and you wear that crown very well.
Thank you. And I've enjoyed relaxing a little bit more, and that's largely thanks to Michael coming on last season, or technically the season before. I can't remember. What is time? But him being able to share the burden has made it that much easier to um, to work at my best and not always just be worrying about what's happening 5 and 10 steps ahead. And it's gotten to the point where now I'm actually DJing sometimes the same night that I'm also projecting, and it's pretty easy to go back and forth and just be sort of as you are often the MC of the show. And I'm looking forward to the long haul.
It's a thrill whenever anybody can get on that mic, but this is definitely worth telling on the podcast. We had Rick Cohen come out, who's a legend in the drive-in industry. He ran the transit, or should I say transformed the transit drive-in. And on that night, Robert was running the DJ and also projecting. And he made a point to pull me aside before he left. And he's like, this guy, Robert, is a rock star. Like, you know, hopping from one piece of equipment to the next. And I'm just like, it's the passion and love that this team has for this place that is the fuel, you know, it really is. And that was on a night when I was literally down and out. So, you know, you guys did more than impress somebody who has really seen it all when it comes to the drive-in industry. And he made a point to also say that, you know, the Mahoning is so special and unique because we've been able to connect the Comic-Con culture and the drive-in culture and have them meet each other. And it's almost like they didn't know they existed together. And in a weird way, that marriage is what is special about the Mahoning. It's fandom incarnate. And you wear that well too, Robert. Why don't you tell the fans some of the costumes you've rocked while projecting?
Or lack thereof.
Or,
that too.
Thank you for taking the words out of my mouth. Yes, last year. And these were things that were, in both cases, pretty last minute. They weren't anything that I thought of until the opportunity was staring me in the face, and I just had to take it. So we had a screening of the 1966 Batman movie, and with, I think, 4, maybe 5 days notice, I ordered a inexpensive Batman costume from Amazon. And
very form-fitting.
Very form-fitting. And used a combination of spray paint, hot glue, modeling clay, fireworks, the sparklers, toilet paper tube, and a basketball to construct a quote-unquote bomb like the one that Adam West's running around with in the movie, dodging nuns and waterfowl, trying to keep any innocents from perishing in the blast. And even though it was raining, I ran around the lot for probably a collective 20-25 minutes that night. The sparklers only lasted maybe 2 minutes, so I gave it my all every time I sprinted around in my costume, and it really helped. It really helped make the night for some people. Not something I would say lightly, but a lot of people told me that, so I have to believe them. And then I don't remember how earlier it was, but that same season, early in the season, we did our remake double take of The Fly, for which James and I believe his brother constructed the Fly telepod, and
John Demmer as well.
And John Demmer, thank you. I was not aware of that. Got to give recognition where due. And Friday night, I saw the prop and I knew what I had to do. So Saturday, I went to Walmart and purchased some flesh-colored underwear, and I performed a Jeff Goldblum publicity photo cosplay, if you will. For all intents and purposes, it looked like I was not wearing anything. And even though I was, it was still very cold. But I was glad to do
level it. To the max.
I just wish I had better advertised myself after the fact. I am available for children's parties,
That looks so cool though, with the telepod and you inside with the fog and everything. That looked fantastic. It was great.
It was really great. I've never had performance anxiety like that before, but once I was doing it, I was very calm and relaxed, which I wouldn't have expected.
And I know I have a picture of you in the platforms for the Kiss event that we did. What was that show? But you dressed up as Kiss.
It was Detroit Rock.
That was for Halloween. Yep.
Yes, Detroit Rock. Yeah.
Oh,
yep.
No,
I got the
right. You did it as a Halloween costume, not for the Kiss show.
Correct. It was, I think maybe a month or 2 months before the end of the season that year, we played Detroit Rock City, and it was Zoe who had the idea of doing my makeup. And I liked the idea, but I didn't want to do it just, slapdash at the last minute. Not to discredit her makeup skills, but there was only so much we could do. And I felt if I'm going to do this, I'm going to really do this. So I got everything I possibly could, the wig, the neck choker, the bodysuit. The boots were especially hard to find. I had to go through a lot of websites to find boots that looked good enough without costing me half of my year's salary from the drive-in, because if you really want to go that far, you can, but gotta stay below a certain threshold.
Oh yeah, naturally. Yeah, and the commitment level is through the roof. And as we mentioned early, we pivot constantly here at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, trying things out constantly. And expanding our calendar certainly put the workload on you in 2021 in a big bad way. I don't know, what was did Mike approach us about the idea, or was it kind of this mutual thing?
I don't remember quite how it started, but I remembered thinking at some point that another projectionist would be useful. And in, I think, just casual conversation with the Drum Boars, Michael said he would be interested. His eyes lit up for sure. And I think that he got a little bit of practice in at the end of that season, but it wasn't until 2022, if memory serves, that he began training under Jeff. Correct me if I'm wrong. And he took to it like a duck to water, in the words of our own Carl.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly right. In fact, Robert, you came to me and told me about his interest. And, do you think it would be all right, Jeff, if we started training him? And I said, sure. I said, let's do it, and I didn't know him that well at that point, but you're absolutely right. He took to it right away.
Yeah, and thus the projection team kind of formed as the trifecta, because at this point it truly is shared. Even on certain nights it's shared. Who's putting together the trailer reel, who's actually running the film. It's a lot goes into it.
Well, it's sort of changing of the guard a little bit, because when I was there, before Patrick came along, I ran every film that came through that place for years and years. And with my bad hip now and 2 bad knees, why, I can't stand up very long at one time. So that Robert and Mike both came along at the right time. So not really changing of the guard, but sort of. They're doing the majority of it now. And I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And again, we're big believers in destiny here, and the idea that certain things present themselves at the right time. And, I don't think we could have had a more destined moment than that Bill Moseley show, because,
Right.
We were kind of back up against the wall, and it was truly a saving grace, to say the least. But from what I understand, Mark, you went to the Patreoners, as we are known to do. For those who don't know, we have an exclusive Patreon where folks get really fun perks. We go to them often for their input and for things like this, where we're looking for questions when we bring on guests. And how did they deliver, Mark?
As always, they delivered voluminously.
You love that word. I love it.
Funny and I do love to use that word as often as I can.
Stop using big words. Come on.
I'll do that expediently. So they always deliver really interesting and thoughtful and funny questions for whatever we ask. So let's just dive in. Will and Angie ask, I'm curious to know, what is the oldest print you ever ran, and how long will a 35 millimeter reel remain playable under ideal storage conditions?
Well, I wish I had a confident answer for the first part and the second part, actually, but sticking with the first part, I know for certain that when we did the most recent Planet of the Apes marathon, that was an original release print of the Planet of the Apes, or Planet of the Apes. So that would have been 53 years old at the time, I believe. And I can't think of anything else I've run where the print itself is older. Granted,
Yeah.
we open each season with The Wizard of Oz, but we're not playing original release prints. We're playing restrikes from re-releases. So it's hard to say for sure. And it wasn't until recently that we started keeping records, to my knowledge, of when prints were being struck when we ran them. So for certain, 53 years old at the time, Unless you gentlemen can think of any older movies that have shown during that time. Actually, now that I'm rambling my mouth, I realize some of the Schlockerama titles would almost certainly be
Right,
older,
definitely.
because
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of those have had restrikes, like probably The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, although it was Jeff who ran that, I believe, and not me. But I'm sure some of those old monster movies are not the type that have gotten restrikes like the Universal Monsters movies, which were playing practically mint condition copies of in many cases, despite their being from the 30s and 40s.
Did
As
you
to the
project?
second,
Sorry,
go on.
did you project the? We usually don't reveal the titles, but it's in the past. The statute of limitations has expired. Did you project the Simplex show where we ran the exhumed vinegar syndrome laden print of The Unearthly?
Yes, that was me. I
'Cause
forgot about that
that's
one.
the oldest thing I can think of that would have been an original print that we've run.
I think you are right, and it certainly was showing its age. I understand that Harry sold that to a company that does restorations of films that are in the public domain, so I'm glad that someone is taking care of that, because I think it's a pretty good movie, despite having seen it for the first time on Mystery Science Theater 3000.
What was the second part of that question? Wasn't there two
Yeah,
parts
I was
to that?
totally oh, how long can a film last under ideal conditions? That's a tough one to answer
It
because
is, but I did have an experience recently that lent some insight into that. I was able to go with my girlfriend Krista to the Nitrate Picture Show at the George Eastman House
I was going to ask.
recently. And one of the things I loved about that, even before being there, this was both of our first times there. And I loved knowing that we weren't going to see anything that weekend that was any younger than 78 years old, I believe, with nitrate film having stopped being used in, I think, 1952, 1953. And they
Yeah.
played prints there that were as old as 1930. So very
Wow.
much close to the 100-year mark, and they definitely have played prints that are older in some other shows. I think it's just a matter of how well cared for it is as far as the projectionists who use it, if it's kept in proper temperature environment, and no matter what you do, even if you handle it perfectly each time you play it, you still have to deal with shrinkage. And that's the biggest thing they have to contend with at the Nitrate Picture Show. So I've heard, tell, and seen videos ostensibly of older film being projected, film as old as the early 20th century and even the late 19th century. I'm not sure about that. We might have to consult with Mr. Bill Morrison for more information.
I love that we have the connections, and I love that when you went there, just like at the Mahoning, you're the rock star. Folks recognized you. They, gave love to the Mahoning. It's like I said, the community and the connections are growing every single week, and this podcast certainly helps that. But that's a grassroots approach. Even though you were going as truly a fan of film, having a representative there of the Mahoning Drive-In Theater was, again, a destined situation.
It is, and it's something I'm still getting used to. Someone I've never met coming up and saying, "I loved you in the documentary," but seeing other people there with Mahoning swag was very nice. And it's nice knowing that our reach is going that far and even further.
It's about the appreciation. I love it.
So, Mr. Kyle Park, our good friend Kyle from Neshaminy Creek Brewing Company, who has released a Mahoning branded beer, if you didn't know that, and will be releasing it again soon, asks this musical question: would like to hear him wax rhapsodic about the differences between film versus digital projection. I'm sure his pro thoughts would be more in-depth than my ramblings.
Well, I'm not sure how professional those thoughts can be, given that we have a little more of a guerrilla type digital projection going.
Yes.
Hopefully one day we can afford one of those Christie's or something comparable. But I would say that they're similar in that they both can have the same problems if they're not well cared for. And that's just speaking as a consumer, as a moviegoer. when I saw with Krista the Banshees of Inisherin last year, it was badly out of focus. And even though I complained, they were not able to fix it. And I thought that those modern digital projectors had some sort of a laser-based system where they would focus automatically, but clearly, even if they have that, that can still be faulty. And if you don't have a projectionist, digital or otherwise, things can, I don't want to use foul language, but let's say they can go to crap pretty quickly if someone's not looking out for the quality control. I've seen some of the greatest movies of my life in digital projection, and I've seen some pretty lousy 35 millimeter programming at some of the competition, if you will, and certainly going back to when everything was 35 millimeter, and we need to continually keep setting the bar higher so that people see how good film can be, and that it's something that you cannot compare to an automated system.
Yeah, and it is a situation where when you give over that trust to the machinery, there's risks that come with that. Anything can happen. Like you said, in a weird way, the shift to digital, and this is nothing against anybody who runs digital, it's a bit more user friendly, and it didn't require, as we know, somebody with a degree or certification to run them. In most cases, it's very young kids who are programming, setting those things up, and they're very much automated, probably for that reason, But setting that bar high for 35 millimeter and the thinning of the herd, I think that there's a lot of 35 millimeter houses at this point, and the respect that they give to 35 millimeter and the experiences that people are getting on 35 millimeter are way better than in the past when, like you said, every movie that we saw, even the theaters that didn't have the love, ran 35. And, anything can go wrong, I guess, when you have the wrong person at the helm. But it's nice that that bar is raised for 35 millimeter and the respect.
It doesn't matter whether it's 35 millimeter or it's digital. You have to know your equipment. If you don't know how to operate it, it's going to look bad.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Kyle has a follow-up that I didn't notice, and not a specific question, but maybe just discuss Oppenheimer's 11-mile-long IMAX 70 millimeter print.
11 miles, baby.
Sure sounds impressive, but if we want to split hairs, the Hateful Eights would be much longer because, as I understand it, those prints were actually spilling off of the platter systems that they had custom built for them. I'm looking forward to seeing Oppenheimer in IMAX 70 millimeter or regular 70 millimeter, but it'll depend in part on my schedule because we're busy enough at the drive-in, and as it turns out, I have been contacted by the Philadelphia Film Society to help them with running their 35 millimeter print of Oppenheimer for the 3 weeks that they are at least initially going to get it. I suppose there's a chance it'll go longer. I'm excited to see it on film regardless of the format, because I've been to enough of the 70 millimeter shows and festivals in New York to know that all of the Christopher Nolan movies are going to come around with some regularity. So if I don't get to see it now, I will be able to see it again at some point. And in all likelihood, I will like the movie enough that I'll want to see it again. I tend to love Mr. Nolan's films more often than not.
Have we heard what the print count is in 35 for Oppenheimer? Because it seems like it's playing almost everywhere that can do 35 does have it.
I feel like I'm just guessing, but if I had to, I would say they're probably striking 50 prints, just knowing what markets are out there. Maybe it's more. I know that they struck 100 for The Hateful Eight, and a lot of those projectors that were obtained and refurbished are probably still in use. A lot of the theaters that did it in 2015 are doing it again now, and hopefully they can keep it going, because if you have a couple of 70 millimeter movies every few years, that'll help keep that equipment in operation and pay those bills and keep those people employed. And whether it's Kenneth Branagh or Tarantino or Christopher Nolan, I'm always happy for it.
Yeah, I do love that directors lean into the presentation, the aftermath, if you will. And Edgar Wright's one of them, certainly. But it gives us confidence as well that for the future, these films by certain filmmakers, they do exist on 35 millimeter. So as a booker, that gives us confidence knowing that, it's that 2014 is not the drop dead date for everything. So
No, no, It all depends what studio made it, and like you said, how many prints are actually going to strike. So no, it wasn't a drop dead date, but they just became so few and far between that most people just said, they're not going to have them anymore. And that's not the case.
Yeah, there's just not enough to sustain most theaters on new releases alone.
Right.
What a treat that you get to run it. That's really fantastic. And I love, just like the artists that work with us, that the work that everybody does and puts into the Mahoning Drive-In Theater kind of spurs them on to other ventures within the culture,
Yep, we've seen it with Michael working at the Colonial. And, I enjoyed working at the Colonial 2 years ago, but since he is so excited to work at those marathons that Harry puts on, I am all the more grateful for a little bit of time off and the opportunity to just go and watch the movies.
I was going to say the opportunity to be in the audience and not in the booth for those shows.
Yeah, which I get to do about 50% of the time at the Mahoning. But, despite what some people say, got to take a break sometimes. It's just, it's a lot more taxing than I think a lot of people realize, because it's not just the physical process of it. There's a lot of mental energy required too. And I feel like I'm going to start answering other questions that people have submitted. So we should probably move on to the next one before that happens prematurely.
Move along. So Robert, our good friend Robert Hood, our good friend, occasional volunteer Robert Hood from the Pittsburgh area asks, did you begin collecting 35 millimeter as a personal hobby, or did it start after you began projecting professionally?
Oh, I think that it kind of has to go a little bit both ways, only because in 2020, the Mahoning did on occasion sell some of their 35 millimeter trailer collection. And I bought a handful of trailers at that point just because I thought it was cool. It's like, oh, here's a trailer for The Black Dahlia. I love Brian De Palma. I'll buy that for $5.
How many copies of Employee of the Month did you buy?
Oh, 0.
We have like 50 of those.
We have a lot.
And I don't know what I feel like we ended up. This is kind of hearsay to say, but it's true. We ended up chopping up a couple of those for extra film when we needed it for leader and things like that in an emergency situation.
That's a good choice.
Yeah, if the leader
plenty.
was non-existent or not long enough, that's necessary to project the film properly for the audience and to safeguard the actual movie of whatever it was that we're showing. So when a trailer is that abundant, I don't feel as bad about that. But at this point anymore, I try to maintain everything. And the only reason I would ever cut something like that now is if it was already beyond the point of being useful. Like that cartoon that we had that has Vinegar Syndrome. We can't play that anymore, so we'll probably end up turning that into some bookmarks for the kids who come into the projection booth. But to the rest of Robert's question, I didn't really start collecting it as a purposeful venture until I was projecting, and I saw the opportunity because I wanted to put together more diverse trailer reels and to play different movie trailers. And there's a lot of great stuff out there on eBay. Sometimes it's a little more expensive than I would like, but at this point, I'm happy to be able to play snipes that actually benefit the business. The gift certificate snipe that I found, which effectively advertises for one of the things that you can buy at our concession stand. The one little snipe that is, reminding people to turn off their cell phone, that actually came from Australia. And I have a new snipe from the UK that I was planning to run last night, except unfortunately, we had that issue and we had to play the screening of The Room digitally, which goes back to the earlier question and a good example of why digital can be a great asset under those circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely.
That Muppet snipe to me is one of the greatest treasures you've uncovered. And
I don't
know. I think I told you on the day, but we ran that at the Muppet event, and then this young guy comes into the projection booth and he said, "I'm the guy who sold you that." So the chance of you running into somebody that sold you something on eBay is just insane to me, but apparently that happened. So up next, we have Brett Ryan Bonowitz asks the question, "Hey, Robert, it's Brett. We just met at the Nitrate Picture Show." And then in parentheses, extra funny if Mark reads this part in the podcast. And I'm not do something
Gotcha.
that's not extra funny, so I did. Hypothetical question. If you could upgrade, or maybe change is a better word, anything at the Mahoning in terms of film equipment, anything to add or perhaps even subtract, what would you do with a bottomless budget other than the water slide?
When I saw this question, only one thing came to mind, and that would be to get a dual projector for 35 and 70 millimeter.
Oh yeah.
We have a screen that is big enough to justify 70, and I don't know for certain, but the only 70 millimeter capable drive-in that I've ever heard of, I believe, is in Australia. So if that information is correct, that would make us the first in the country to be doing that type of screening.
Yeah, that's one that comes up pretty regularly. And it's a tough question because, we've talked about it over and over again, like what things we could add, what things could we take away. But the sell of the place, as everybody knows who's a fan of the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, is its originality. So everything that you see there is very much the way it was when we opened in 1949. And in a strange way, the magic of the Mahoning is truly in the, I guess, ingenuity behind working with what you have. And we didn't have the luxury ever of being like, oh, we'll just throw money at that. So that really causes and forces people to get creative. And in a lot of ways, it's that kind of Little Rascals mentality that has gained us notoriety. So I wish a lot of things, but in a weird way, that's one of the biggest gifts is our situation to have to get clever.
Indeed. And I love the idea of doing 70, but I don't think that it's practical for any, short or long-term purposes. So it's a dream. But I really think that you're right. And a lot of the best work that people do in any medium is the result of compromise.
Absolutely.
So Donnie Morgan is a secret weapon of the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. He has been, if you've seen the raffles that we do this season, the vast majority of what's in those raffles has been just Donnie Morgan shows up with boxes of stuff and says, here's the raffle. And he has it all labeled and he has it all numbered. He has provided these amazing buttons that we won't go into because it's a secret for our Patreon Simplex screening. We ran a movie that was goofy, what I sadly wasn't there for, and he created these buttons based on that film that he's been handing out to people that are hilarious. Donnie Morgan asks, if a couple was going to conceive a child on the Mahoning lot and they let you pick the movie, what would you play and why? And then Kyle Park comes in, he taps in. Kyle Park comes in and says, and what should they name the child?
I'm still a little mystified at this question, so I wasn't able to come up with an answer ahead of time. So just to kind of mess with them back, I think I would play, there's a French horror film called The Ordeal, or in its original language, Calvaire. And I don't know why, but that's where my mind is going. And as far as what they would name the child, I would say Tony, because that can fit whether it's a boy or a girl.
Calvaire would be a pretty badass.
I thought you were going to say Calvaire.
Meet my son Cal. Where'd you come up with that name? It's a long story.
Yeah.
Yeah, a huge shout out to Donnie. I tell everybody he's the greatest new fan of the Mahoning. Such a giver. Everybody loves him. He's there for all the right reasons. He's a gift.
Yeah, I couldn't be there for that screening, but that button he made is great.
Yeah.
Just keeps. I keep it in my pocket. We won't say what it is. I keep it in my sweatshirt pocket, and as I walk around, and once in a while, I'll just reach in, I'll pull it out, and I'll look at it, and it'll make me smile, and it goes back in the pocket. It's a pocket full of joy. It's a hunk of joy. Michael Schilling says, your dream double feature.
That's a tough one. I feel like I would have had an answer for this years ago, and now all that less important information has just kind of gotten shelved, and I can't access it as readily anymore. But I think that what I would probably pick, and this was something I remembered from our screening of The Night of the Hunter, 2 years ago. I can't remember when we played that. Maybe it was last year.
Last
But
year, yeah.
I'm thinking because of, if you know the imagery from the movie, the tattoos, love and hate, I would do a double feature of The Night of the Hunter and Do the Right Thing.
Oh,
brilliant.
yeah. I see the poster now. Perfect.
That's
How
brilliant.
about that?
I love that.
And that was one
Write
of my
it down.
favorite nights ever. I hope we get to play that movie again someday so I can see it on our screen. I watched what I could, but you can't really enjoy the view while you're driving the car.
No, yeah, that's the
Right.
truth.
Right.
Yeah, Jeff says that all the time. When we're talking about the calendar, he'll say, I ran it, but I don't really remember much. It's like you can't really watch the movie when you're running it. Maybe some people
Not
think
really.
that's a luxury you guys have, but not the
No.
case.
It's funny. You are the person who is physically closest to the movie on the lot, and you don't even see it.
Not much of it. Nope.
Nope. They emphasized that at the Nitrate Picture Show, that those projectionists get to watch maybe 25% of the movie. And it's a slightly higher stakes situation for them. They have to watch that equipment like a hawk. But it's not that much different for us, because even if you are watching the movie, there's so much noise from the machines, and you're usually hearing people talking in the concession stand. It's hard to really lock in like I prefer to.
Yeah, that'll come back 100%, literally top 5 for me.
Brendan in Jersey asks, top 5 prints you've run for whatever reasons, and maybe 3 bucket list prints you've yet to run.
That's one that I thought about trying to come up with my top 5, but I decided it would be better for the podcast that it was a little more spontaneous. So let me think. Just going based on personal favorites that have also played at the drive-in, I would probably go The Night of the Hunter, Night of the Living Dead, The Terminator. 2 more. What 2 more? It's an easy choice, but it's true. The Wizard of Oz.
Yep, I was going to
And-
say it. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I love it more and more each time I see it. And you know what? Number 5, well, actually, these aren't in any particular order, but to round it out, Streets of Fire.
Perfection. That was another great one.
And I try and be very critical of myself, not to be negative, but so that my work improves. And I think that was one of my best jobs ever. I don't think that I made any mistakes that night. So I'm really glad that I got to run it, and I'm glad that it was enjoyed by all who saw it.
Absolutely.
So the other part of that question, 3, what's the nomenclature? I have a list of the questions
Bucket
here
list
too.
prints.
That's it. Gosh, part of me wants to say the original cut of the Magnificent Ambersons, but I know if they ever find it, they're certainly not going to let us run it. But we're dreaming here, so maybe that'll be one of them. For sure, one of them, and maybe you gentlemen are aware of this, the work in progress edition of Disney's animated Beauty and the Beast. I
I've
have
heard
a
of it,
feeling
yeah.
I have a feeling they still have that print somewhere, and it would be wonderful if they would ever play it again for a general public exhibition. Because to my knowledge, it only ever played the one time at the New York Film Festival.
Was
And,
it major differences?
Well, what happened with that was they wanted to premiere it at the New York Film Festival, but the movie was only about 70% complete. So they struck a print in that fashion, and about 30% of the movie is just line drawings and sketches.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
thankfully, they did a really nice special edition DVD of that movie about 20 some years ago, and you can watch that version on that DVD. Those special features were not carried over, so if you buy the Blu-ray, you're not going to find it there. But that original DVD, you can see it, and it might be my favorite way to watch the movie. Something about how the energy and the beauty carries over from the finished, polished final product to the rough sketches. It's beautiful in a way that it's really hard to describe. I think you just have to see it.
Yeah.
And you gentlemen are welcome to borrow my copy, because I think that DVD might be getting a little pricey. When I bought it, it was like $30, and that was some time ago.
Physical media for life.
Definitely, absolutely. Gosh, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
We know it's
Maybe-
Poseidon Adventure. Moving on. Just kidding.
Going. You know what? Yeah, number 3, I'll pick just my favorite movie, McCabe and Mrs. Miller.
There you go, baby. One day it's going to happen. I do love that.
Hopefully.
Like a good Sunday
Hopefully.
Essentials title.
Yeah. On a nice cold night, boom.
Yeah.
Tom Sroka asks, what has been the most challenging aspect of being a projectionist?
Honestly, it's hard to pick just one because it's sometimes the late nights, when you're playing the third James Bond movie that starts at 3 in the morning and you don't know how much more coffee you can physically consume. But as small as it is, one of the hardest things for me is when you're standing by the projector waiting for the real change to come. The bell's rung and you're just waiting, and the wind's blowing in your face and you're trying not to blink, and your eyes are getting dry, and maybe you can kind of blink one half and then the other half so that you're not missing the cue mark. But
It's an art, baby. It's an art.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's always
yeah.
a lot of fun.
It's for me, that is much more difficult than the many hours it takes to prepare films and trailers and all this and that. Physical labor, time, that's not that hard, but controlling a natural reflex like blinking when it's the absolute last thing you want to do, that's the most difficult thing in my mind.
Like he's perfected blinking with one eye. One at a time. It's a gift.
Sometimes you get the weather right in the face when you're looking through that porthole.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just catching the mist sprinkling on you. Yeah.
Yep,
That
everything.
too.
So the next question is from our good friend, Mr. Gene Beretta. Gene, you may know as award-winning children's book author and illustrator. You may also know him as half of the Beretta Brothers podcast team. You may also know him as the guy who was the driving force between Muppets Take Mahoning, a great success we had recently. He also writes insane questions when we ask people for them. So,
he's also known for that credit.
So sit back and relax while I read this, and hopefully don't mess up his artistry, because you want to talk about a work of art. I've just been skimming this question. This is masterful. Rob, imagine this. It's 8:45 on a Saturday night. You're about to run a long-anticipated Neil Breen Fest, which must really happen. Neil is there. Mark is not. Mark is hosting a Peter Tork Fest and knocks out all the power in Lehighton, which is odd, because that means someone actually showed up. Neil says he is a wizard when it comes to county power grid repair, but you think he's just quoting one of his self-righteous and delusional film characters and laugh it off. I quit the week before to start a Super 8mm retro theater. Virgil and Jeff are on the third leg of the Puppetry of the Penis tour. What do you do? A. A silent scream like Michael in Godfather Part 3. B. Have Louis Sullivan sit and read a Neil Breen script to the patrons. C. Initiate the first Mahoning Planetarium show. What do you do? What do you do?
B. Next question.
When in doubt, go to Louis and he will read the script.
So eventually we're going to talk about, what's happened thus far this season on this show, but that is a reference to what happened during Werewolf Weekend recently, where a lightning strike knocked out the power at the Mahoning on Friday night of that show, and we couldn't do a show. We basically had to send everybody home, but Louis steps up and says, I have a copy of Stephen King's Cycle of the Werewolf, which is the book that Silver Bullet that we were going to show that night was based on, and I could do a dramatic reading, and I'll be damned if he didn't do that. He sat on the photo op stage, lit by the headlights of a couple of cars, and he read that entire book, which I'm told took about 2 hours, dramatically, and people stayed for it.
It was amazing because I could hear him in the projection booth and I could still hear him, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, I didn't know that he read the entire book. That's incredible. That makes me wish we could do something like the Tell in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, where we either use the car headlights or the fire to create some sort of proto-cinema like that, but that's genius nonetheless.
It was amazing. Single-handedly saved that evening. It was pure fandom on display and pure love for what we do on display. We love Louis.
Yeah. A fantastic idea.
Mike Kenny asks, how do you and Mike generally decide who runs which films? Also, what's the greater thrill these days, witnessing a film on 35mm or being able to run it, and why?
Generally, Mike and I hash things out a couple days before the new week starts. We'll decide who's going to run Tuesday, And then based on however many movies there are in the course of the week, we'll try and split it down the middle. So this coming week, we have 8 movies in total, 6 movies Friday, Saturday, one on Sunday, one on Tuesday. So we're each going to do 4. And usually there isn't a particularly strong feeling either way about what we want to watch or what we want to run. But if there is, we've always been able to accommodate it. And as far as what's a greater thrill, I feel like I have to say watching them, because having gotten the thrill of projecting them, I now know what goes into the exhibition. So I feel like I'm appreciating that in a removed sense. I'm experiencing that vicariously while watching the movie. And that's something that I've grown to appreciate more as I get to go to more and more theaters playing movies on film.
And it's a circuit too. It really is a situation where, drive-ins, indoors, if we're 35 millimeter, we are connected in that way.
Absolutely.
Mistress Zeneca asks, how many films have broken, burned, or otherwise got mangled because they were too old? Any info about those? What is the sign to you that it's just too old to run? What are the points that you inspect a film for?
Well, in my experience, I don't have hard data on this, but I would say there have been maybe 3 or 4 movies that have had, whether it's a leader snapping when you start the reel or something breaks partway through the print. It doesn't happen very much, but a lot of these prints are very old, and even if you do everything right, they're going to break sometimes. The best example of that I can think of is one where I was not projecting the film, Michael was. But when we played The Omen last year, that print had more shrinkage than any print I have ever seen, to my knowledge at least. And it broke probably at least 3 or 4 times and added a good half hour to the screening because of the amount of time it takes to fix things after a film break. And we actually had to move one of those reels from projector 1 to projector 2 in hopes that projector 2 would go a little easier on the film. And I mean, Michael kept his cool and did a very good job with it. I haven't had anything even close to that. I've had a film break, I don't think ever more than once. So he definitely earned his sea legs that night.
Oh, yeah. That's one that'll go down in the books.
As far as signs that it's just too old to run, that's something I don't really feel qualified to answer. I might be able to tell you if I saw something, but if it's something where it's just kind of towing the line, I don't have the means of measuring film shrinkage. I don't know quite, where the line would be drawn as far as those tolerances go. I could check something with the measuring tool on the splicer, but other than that, it would just be kind of an instinctive thing. And as far as what I look for when I'm inspecting a film, there's the basics that you look for, making sure that the leader is the correct length and that the cue marks are where they're supposed to be, and adding new ones if need be with the grease pencil. But as far as anything else, you want to look for major damage with, any broken sprockets that you're worried could catch in the projector and rip the film further. So you'd want to reinforce those. And once in a while, you'll come across a splice that was very poorly made and needs to be redone. Because if it's, if it's, for lack of a more technical term, if it's out of whack enough, it's going to jump the sprockets at some point. We even had a print of, I want to say, Ghost of Frankenstein 2 or 3 years ago. And there was such a poor splice on that print that it managed to actually jump the sound head without jumping any of the other sprockets. So the movie kept playing, but it suddenly turned into a silent movie, and we had to stop it and rethread it and get it going again. And thankfully, it wasn't damaged any further, but that's the type of thing that really should have been corrected. Whoever did it the first time, I can't even begin to imagine how they did it, because it was the type of thing that was so poorly done. I don't think they had the equipment that they needed to do it properly. It would have been better to leave a note so that the next person could have done it instead. And at that point in time, I was not aware that something like that could even happen. So it's always a learning process.
Absolutely. The more you're in the driver's seat, the more you learn, you know?
Definitely.
Mr. Brian Wallace asks, if you've seen Fight Club, do you view Brad Pitt's character as A, a rebel who's shaking up and waking up the emasculated sheep of capitalist monoculture, or B, an irresponsible projectionist who is the stain of the profession? Follow-up, if Rob were to insert a single frame of something into a print to mess with the viewing public, what would it be?
These questions are phenomenal.
Oh,
People
man.
are great. They're geniuses.
I didn't get part B of that question in the pre-show notes, so I'll have to think about that. But as far as Jack or Tyler's projection skills, he's clearly irresponsible. People show up to watch a kids movie. They deserve to watch the kids movie without any extra dick being involved, unless it's Dick Miller.
Unless they've come into a double feature of Mary Poppins and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
The more dick, the
Precisely. Yeah, I love Fight Club, the movie, and it's one of those movies I saw at just the right age. But it's the type of movie that is misunderstood by a lot of the people who are fans of it. They take the wrong message, the polar opposite message, I would argue. And as far as splicing something, I did play around with that with the reel I put together for the staff party last year. I don't quite remember what it was, but it was just a single frame of something that I think had to be removed from a print at some point along the line. But gosh, what would I do? I wouldn't want to re-edit a movie. Maybe if I owned the print. If I owned a print, I would be more open to that idea, because I think I've mentioned to you gentlemen before, I am thinking of taking my print of Titanic and cutting the reel where, if you had the movie on VHS, the intermission was built in to the home viewing experience.
Change the tape intermission, yes.
Exactly, and making it such that we could have a clean intermission if we played it at the drive-in, not that you're doing it sloppily, because that scene is in the middle of a reel. I think it's reel 6 of 10, because that break is perfect. It ends with the line to Mr. Ismay, and it resumes with Billy Zane slapping Kate Winslet 8 ways to the promenade deck. And I think that I would be willing to cut my print for that purpose. The print is already a little bit damaged, so it wouldn't be like a pristine copy that I'm altering in any way. But man,
and when we talk
know.
about rare prints, Titanic is not one of them.
No,
that played in a couple theaters. I don't know if people know that or not.
Yeah. Even considering the fact that hundreds of copies of that movie just disintegrated because they were played so much. There's a lot out there on the collector's market. Yeah, I don't know. I think that might have to be a question that we answer on the next episode that I'm featured on. That's going to take some time in the old noodle to come up with a good answer.
That's a great question, yeah.
And we did get one more question right before we started recording. So this is going to be fresh to you. So your honest initial reaction. This is from a Ms. Christa Strobel. Is that how you pronounce
that? That's how you pronounce it for now, and I think I love it.
It might also be Christa Strobel. There are so many beautiful prints that just aren't available on 35 millimeter to screen anymore, as far as anyone knows. If you could find one long lost print, what would you want it to be? It can be a print of something you truly love and doesn't have to be for the good of humanity.
Wow. I feel like this question could be taken a couple different ways, because it could be a movie I love that there are no prints available. It could be a movie that is lost. Gosh. I don't know. Do you gentlemen think that there's am I reading that question in the right way, or perhaps I'm giving it more ambiguity than she intended?
I think either way, you should try contacting her. I think either way, it's something that just isn't available on film that you wish you could run, or that we could find a print of.
That's tough. Gosh. Part of me wants to be very schlocky about it. I mean, we have Schlockorama on the horizon, and there are a lot of movies that Harry would like to play for Schlockorama that he just cannot get anymore. They are, well-known, well-loved movies that played a lot, and the prints are too damaged, and whoever owns them doesn't want to release them anymore because they think that it would make them look bad. And I wish that they were more open to that experience of seeing a movie that has all those scratches and missing frames, because that's just as legitimate an experience, in my opinion. I think I would like to be able to run a print of Fiend Without a Face, which is one of my favorite 50s sci-fi monster movies.
That's always so great.
It's probably never going to be able to get a high definition release at this point, because my understanding is they don't even know where the prints are anymore, whether they're in good condition or not. And without those negatives, without new material to work with, we're probably stuck with the DVD, but at least we have that, because there are so many great movies that are completely permanently lost to time. And it's better to have something than nothing. So that's one of probably 100 different movies I could come up with to answer that question. I know that she would probably like me to say The Cat o' Nine Tails, a Dario Argento picture that I have actually never seen and is probably not possible to get on film anymore. And yeah, it's sad, but that's the way it is sometimes. Like Better Off Dead. You guys looked high and low and could not find a print of Better Off Dead. That's surprising to me, but hopefully, one day someone turns over a rock and there it is.
Or somebody finds a depot in a warehouse somewhere that has all the prints sitting there.
That's possible too. Yeah.
Never know.
There's a lot of stuff out there that's just waiting to be discovered.
Now, that's the end of our Patreon questions, but I remembered that I had written something down based on a conversation we had God knows how long ago that I was going to wait to ask you about when you were on the podcast again. What is Fuji rot?
My understanding is that Fuji rot is specific to a certain era of movies, I think from the 80s and 90s and possibly beyond, and where some prints fade to pink, Fuji rot movies fade to purple. But that actually might not be so much to do with the color. Thinking about it now, because I'm not the expert some people would think I am. I'm still very much learning about all these things, but thinking about it in the moment, I'm remembering the print we had of Coffee, and it was marked as having Fuji rot, and we weren't sure that that was actually the case. It seemed like the print was struck too late for that to be the case, as memory serves, but there was a kind of crackly sound on the soundtrack for that movie. It sounded like Rice Krispies, and that is ostensibly the result of Fuji rot. So that's my layman answer.
When we ran the Abominable Dr. Phibes print, didn't that have some crackly audio as well?
I seem to remember that being the case. I don't know for sure, but I would trust your memory of that since I believe you watched it that night.
Yeah, and those are both AIP films from within a couple of years of each other, and they both came to us from Park Circus. And I know when the AIP films were getting MGM Midnight Movies releases back in the 90s on DVD, they were striking and releasing a lot of new prints of those. And I almost wonder if they ran both of those around that time and it was just like a bad lab batch or something like that.
Yeah.
That strikes me as the reason, or one of the likely reasons, yeah.
I think we took a picture of that Coffee print because, not only does the Fuji rot go after the picture, but it goes after the soundtrack as well. And if you were to look at it, it almost looks like little green dots, like it has chicken pox or something like that, And it's clear, every pop, every crackle that you heard was a result of that deterioration of the soundtrack. But again, that's just going off of my knowledge. I was going to say Fuji rot, it would also be a great band name if you guys are down to get together and form a band.
That would be, yeah.
I ran one of Clint Eastwood's spaghetti westerns that had that rot, and it was just green dots all over the film.
Yeah.
I mean, not just the soundtrack. I mean, you could see the green dots on the film. It was crazy. People watched it anyway because it was Clint Eastwood. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing ever to look at, where it was very defined speckles,
Yeah, I just Googled it and I found an image posted by Agfa on Twitter. And yeah, it has these little dots all over the image and the soundtrack. It looks considerably worse than that print of coffee did. That print of coffee looked really good. It was just the audio that was an issue, but I think I wouldn't have minded if I had been in the audience.
Yeah, I think it played very well, and especially because the only other available print of coffee, from what we understand, is insanely pink, and this one that we got had some really good colors still. So I'll take image quality over that rough sound for sure,
Yeah, it seemed like a more than fair trade-off.
without a doubt. Well, we can't thank you enough, Robert, for making the time for us tonight and for the audience who loves you so much. But more importantly, we can't thank you enough for everything that you do for the Mahoning and for the spirit of the Mahoning. It goes so, so far. You have no idea.
Right.
Much appreciated. It's always good to be reminded of that because it can get so absorbing doing the work that you forget about the bigger picture. And I hope that I don't even feel like I have to hope for it. It is evergreen because our audience is constantly growing. And it's always wonderful when a new family or a new couple or anybody comes into the booth for the first time with that glow in their eyes and to show them and tell them about what we do. It's one of the great joys in my life.
You're right. It is evergreen. It's one of those situations that we feel confident that we can pivot and try things out because our audience is ever growing. And our whole goal is to try to share this experience with as many people as possible. So we're going to try to continue to do that. And we know it. The work behind these movies is something that, thanks to the documentary, thanks to the podcast, is getting more respect and more love. And, you know, you guys are in a rare field on your own, but you guys are really setting the bar high for the 35 millimeter culture out there.
We definitely try to. I try and treat everything the same way. I mean, there are times we play movies that I am not a fan of or even dislike, but I want to give them the exact same experience, those audiences the exact same experience, and those movies the exact same treatment across the board. Because every movie is somebody's favorite movie. And whether they've come 10 miles or 10 hours to come see it at our place, they deserve the red carpet.
That's right, baby.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yep.
And to all the Patreoners who submitted the questions, we appreciate that. We don't say it enough. Mark, why don't you let the folks know how they can get in on the Patreon?
If you go to patreon.com/Mahoning Drive-In, all the details are there. It's basically a 3-tiered subscription program where for $4.99, $9.99, or $19.99, you can get different perks. Each level gets the perks that the level below it had. And the top level gets free monthly screenings, free monthly online screenings, and an enamel pin when I eventually get around to solidifying the design for this year. And it's a fun value-added kind of thing. It helps support the theater. It helps give us income in the off-season to help start booking prints and paying for things. And it's a way to get a little bit more of an inside look into the theater. We post a lot of things on there that we don't have space for on our normal social media stuff, like the Q&As that we do and the celebrity introductions where Rob will tell a zombie actor that he deserved the Oscar and not the late William Hurt. You know, you get to see a little bit more inside the theater and have some more fun interactive stuff. So that's there if you're interested in it.
Yeah, and it's just like the community that has built around the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. It's a lovely community, and every time we do those Patreon screenings and get those folks out, it's truly a treat. Well, I think that covers us for today, and I think on that note, Jeff, take it away, my friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for coming out tonight to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. We hope you'll come back and see us again real soon. The exit is on the right-hand side of the screen at the front of the field, and most importantly, have a very safe trip home. Good night and God bless you.